Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to talk about food and food choices. I'm here with Vincent Blok from Wageningen University and Leon Jansen. He's from the Dutch Choices Foundation, and that's you can find it if you go to a Dutch supermarket. It has a little check mark in the corner. It used to be called "Ik kies bewust," I make a conscious choice, but now they just leave it to the check mark. Let's start off with salt intake. The doctor would advise you to eat 6 grams of salt every day or less. Certainly no more. More would pose you health risks like cardiac problems. It would lead to strokes. So it's an epidemic risk. In England, the average salt intake for a grown-up is at this moment almost 12 grams, which is double. In parts of the United States, it would be 18 grams of salt every day. So that's a huge amount of salt. And in Holland, I think we're just a bit below that, at around, I think 9.5 grams of salt for a grown-up. Now, the biggest part of all this salt we take is through processed foods. So it's food you buy in the supermarket, like a pizza or canned food or whatever. So would you say, Vincent Blok, just to start with the ethical question, that it should be considered a crime to cause an epidemic by giving people too much salt?
Now, a crime is maybe a bit too much, but indeed, the question is, we are facing all kinds of lifestyle diseases in Europe, for instance, obesity and diabetes type 2. And the question is, who is responsible for the enormous amount of sugar and salt intake of consumers? Now, you can argue that the consumer himself is responsible, but increasingly companies also see that they have a responsibility, at least, for the reduction of salt consumption. So I don't want to say that companies are responsible, or there are also governments are responsible, but also consumers and companies all together have to take this responsibility.
But you make a product, you advertise for it, you try to make people eat your product, while you know, because it's your profession, you know that there's way too much salt in there. I think, well, a crime might be a big word, but let's say there's a responsibility that should be taken more seriously, at least.
Yeah, there's one example from the people who come from the Netherlands. They once have eaten, for instance, Old Amsterdam cheese. That's very famous, so I can recommend it also for the foreign people. But the association or Foundation for Consumers in the Netherlands, they did a research and they found out that this company, Old Amsterdam, increase the amount of salt with 15%. So that means that if we have something like an epidemic situation with salt consumption in the Netherlands, and at the same time a company is increasing the amount of salt and to this extent, then you can say this is not normal. This shouldn't be forbidden or something like that, or this shouldn't be allowed. So in such extreme cases in which companies offer a product which is containing, for instance, more than 6 grams of salt, then in my opinion, you can say there is an ethical issue at stake here. Yeah.
Last year I talked to an American food writer called Michael Moss. He wrote a book with the title, which is Fat, Salt and Sugar. So that's a very clear title. And he says that it's become almost like a weapons race in the food industry, because you want people to crave for your product, and the way to do that is to add more sugar, more fat and more salt. And it's like a rat race, and even for the food companies it has become difficult to escape that. Do you think it would be easy for producers to add less salt, or would it cause them problems?
It's difficult to answer this question because it is relatively easy to take a critical stance towards companies and their innovations for bad food, for instance, and look at companies like McDonald's and Coca-Cola, etc. But we see also in the Netherlands, we see a trend also of big companies like Unilever and Friesland Campina, for instance, that they at least feel partly responsible for healthy food, and that they are in fact involved in innovations for more healthy food products. So yes, there is a problem. It is difficult to escape these kind of trends, as you mentioned, but at the same time we see also some companies who take increasingly responsibility. And of course, from an ethical stance we can, and that's also part of our research, to which extent are they responsible? Is it window dressing, or is it real moral responsibility? These are the questions we have to raise, but there seem to be also positive trends, in my opinion.
And a possible innovation would be a product that you crave for without so much salt, sugar or fat in it. For instance, something you can design that tastes creamy and yummy and everything that you crave for while it's healthy at the same time. It should be invented, I think.
You see also in the supermarkets that there's an increasing amount of products in which bad ingredients are replaced by innovative new ingredients or ways of production that are less bad or that are more healthy for you as a consumer. Yeah.
Otherwise, you would invent the apple, which is already there, but somehow not everybody wants to eat it. Leon Jansen, this check mark. What kind of products would you say are typical check mark products?
A very easy example is whole grain bread with less salt, because in that whole grain bread there's more fiber, which helps to prevent some intestinal cancers, and it satisfies more, so you eat less with whole grain products.
But you say it's less bad.
No, it's the better option within the product group. So if you have to choose,
that's what you're looking for, is not the good option, but the better option.
We are not looking for the best option, because there is not only one product which is the best. I think and if there's only one product, then it's probably not in every supermarket available. But you have to give consumers enough choice to choose the better product. So the top 10 or 20% of the best quality products, they only can get the check mark. And for every product group, there are different criteria to which the product has to fulfill. And these are criteria on saturated fat, sugar, salt, fiber, energy, etc.
So it's within the group of products. So it could be that mayonnaise, for instance, gets the check mark of a healthy choice.
Yeah, and then it's not the original mayonnaise, because there's a lot of fat in it. But these are the halvenaise, the mayonnaise with less salt and less saturated fatty acids, that can get a check mark, because within those product group of mayonnaises, these are the best options. You have to think of a consumer who's standing before the shelves in the supermarket, and they want to choose something. They have on the list, I have to buy mayonnaise. So they stand for the shelves and they have to, well, which one should I buy? And for consumers, it's very difficult to check all the ingredients and the amounts and to make a decision which one is healthier than the other ones. And we made it quite easy for the consumers. That is, if they look at the check mark, they know there are a lot of quality aspects for a lot of nutrients that the product has to fulfill to get this check mark. So that is the healthier option within this product group.
Now, this check mark is meant to give consumers the choice. So it's meant to make them more aware. But that places the ball right back at the consumers. Suddenly it has become their responsibility to add less sugar, fat and salt to their food. Well, we just agreed that it might be wiser to have some responsibility with the companies. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I agree that there is a responsibility for the companies also. And that's why we developed the check mark system in a way that there is a scientific committee which sets the criteria, and every 4 years they evaluate the criteria and they make it more strict where possible. And you see that companies don't want to lose the check mark on the product. So if the criteria become more strict, then the producer, and when the product does not fulfill the new criteria, then the producer has two options. Either it removes the check mark from the label, or it innovates the product towards a healthier product and it can keep the logo. And we see that this system works in a way that the producers are most of the time stimulated to innovate their product and to get salt and sugar out of the product to keep the check mark on the label.
So actually it's not meant for the consumer, it's meant for the producer.
Yeah, it's meant in two ways. I think,
Okay.
but I think the biggest effect is the effect on the producer, because if they change the composition of a product and the product will be more healthy, then also a lot of consumers who don't pay attention at all to this kind of check marks and the compositions, they buy automatically a healthier product and they start to eat a healthier product.
Does it really make a difference? Is that why the companies care? Because they notice that they sell less if it does not have the check mark?
This effect is not clear. It's from some producers we get a signal that the check mark helps a little bit to improve the selling of the product, but from other producers we hear that they don't find any effect at all, and I think there's more ethical motivation of the company itself to have a responsible product they sell to their customers.
Vincent, would there also be a role for the government? Could you do this by law enforcement? Just say it's forbidden to add more than 6 grams of salt to a pizza.
Yeah, of course you can enforce almost everything with laws, but it is also it is not always effective, because there are always ways to circumvent new laws, and these new regulations are always lagging behind. And we also have a culture, maybe here in the Netherlands at least, that we try with soft laws by making arrangements between the industries, governments, and, for instance, researchers to make transitions happen. And what is interesting in this research project is that we see an increased demand by the government to reduce salt and sugar consumption. We see also an increased responsibility taken by companies. We see also an increased consciousness of consumers about healthy food. And what is interesting now to see is whether such a logo for like choices can help to set the innovation agenda of corporations, because we can inform consumers, for instance, about salt and sugar, but information, knowledge is not really convincing for most people to change their behavior. While these companies are in fact innovating for more healthy food, maybe it's slow or it is fast. That's a discussion you can have. It's a separate discussion, but they are involved in this. And what could be interesting to see whether such an innovation system, which is driven by a logo like choices, can make change happen in this food industry and innovations which take place in this sector.
So now we get to the research, because the logos are already there. The food companies are already using it. What is the purpose of the research? What are you hoping to find, and how are you going to do it?
Yeah. And now the project is about innovating for more healthy food, and we see, as I explained before, we see some trends, or we see some developments, but we are interested in two things. First, the normative question, and in this project we have 2 PhDs, one philosopher. And then the normative question is central. What should be the responsibility of a company for healthy food production and healthy food innovation? That is also empirically informed, because we will also interview managers at the company level of companies. Why are they involved? We know, or it's not completely clear, whether companies will sell more products with this logo. So we assume that there is at least some consciousness or some type of responsibility which is acknowledged by these companies, and we are interested in what are these drivers for these companies to embrace or to have an innovation agenda towards more healthy food products and food innovations, but also if they embrace a logo like choices, and choices is in this case is for us only a case here, is this a driver for innovations in this more healthy direction? So that is the normative ethical research. And the second one is more focusing on individual food product. What Choices has a database with the composition of food products. And it's a database of almost 10 years, if I understood correctly. And what we can see is how food products actually evolved. And based on the evolution of food products, we plan to do interviews with R&D managers or employees in R&D departments to ask them, okay, this was happening in the database. We saw that you increased or you reduced the amount of salt, or this is the moment when you decided to step out of the logo. What were the motivations? What were the barriers for you? Why did you not embrace the logo anymore with this product? So that enables us to identify the dynamics behind such a logo as a driver for innovation processes. So that is more on the that's the second PhD project we try to develop within this project.
Okay, well there's more food advice than just a logo. It came from Bill Clinton, for instance. He had a heart attack a couple of years ago, and he came out and had the advice for everybody: don't eat anything with any logo on it. Become an iconoclast. And as soon as you see a big trademark on it, don't eat it. That's one advice. Michael Moss said, don't eat anything that your grandmother would not recognize as food, which I think is also a great advice. And I think the biggest advice, and that was actually in the report I mentioned earlier on, that anything that you cook yourself or that you see someone else cooking while you're there, where you can look the chef in the eyes, is always less salt than anything processed. So I think that, as long as people go to supermarkets and buy pizzas, we might need logos, but I think in the end, that will be the wiser choice. What do you think? To just start cooking?
Yeah, I think it's an advice that we already know for several years, also in the Netherlands, that people should get more attached to their own food production. So they should more cook themselves and use recipes, etc. But the other fact is that more and more people don't have time to do that, and they just buy the ingredients in the supermarket and mix up the ingredients and have a meal. So I think you cannot turn back the clock and get everyone to get the food from the farmers and cook their own products. So as long as there are supermarkets, I think especially the lower socio-economical status people, you have to help to choose the healthier products. You have to stimulate the industry to improve those products. Otherwise this obesity tsunami which comes all over the world. In the Netherlands, more than 50% has overweight. It goes on. So we have to encounter that somehow. And this logo of us is only helping a little bit in this process. The other way is getting people more active, etc. But we hope that we have a little contribution in the fight against obesity and all the other non-communicable diseases. And I think the research will help us more to understand how this innovation process goes on in companies. What are the motives for companies to join this kind of initiatives? And that helps our foundation to approach the companies and to stimulate them to also step in this innovation circle and also join this kind of initiative. And it should not be using the logo. It can also be that they just follow the criteria of the scientific committee and improve the products without using the logo. That's fine for us, as long as the offering, the quality of the food that is offered will be improved.
And we're still talking just about single products. We're not talking about a meal yet. So if you buy the good macaroni and you add the bad ketchup, or you add the worst cheese, then you're still having a problem. So that's even more complicated. What do people eat as a meal or as a breakfast? Thank you very much, and thank you.